what these guys are doing is as follows. Electric vehicles are significantly heavier than, like 4 times heavier than regular vehicles. What does that mean? It means more wear and tear on bridges, more wear and tear on parking structures. And so number one, we're gonna have massive infrastructure cost increase. Secondly, EVs are expensive. They will continue to be expensive. They are much more expensive than a internal combustion engine vehicle. And they will be for the foreseeable future. Why? The internal components, the batteries, are very expensive. Replacing batteries on EVs now costs between $15,000 and $40,000, depending on the car. Essentially, the price you total of the car if you damage the battery. Batteries run down. Batteries are not effective. Battery-run cars, electric vehicles, are not effective in northern climates. You know, all those people who voted for Biden up in New England, you know what they're not going to be able to do? They're not going to be able to drive in the winter. So their problems are not just going to be the fact that Biden's eliminating the stock of the fuel that they use to heat their homes, the fuel oil. What they also are doing is he's sitting there and he's going to eliminate their vehicle to get their ability to get around in vehicles because they won't be able to buy a car that'll run effectively in cold weather. Similarly, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Montana, Idaho, northern Idaho in particular, you're looking at a wholesale disaster based on electric vehicle requirements. Because you know what? If they're really worried about climate change, they better hope they're right, because unless the places like that get a heck of a lot warmer in the next 10 years, your driving is going to be restricted to basically about 50 miles from your home, and then you have to recharge. So that's your challenge, okay? They don't work. The technology isn't there. 3, the increased demand for electric vehicles will create a net massive new demand onto your electric power grid, which is not equipped for it, is not being expanded for it. In fact, it's being diminished based upon reliance on renewables rather than on things that actually we know work, like natural gas, coal, and fuel oil. Those are things we know work. We know what they produce. Renewables are not reliable because you get a cloud, you get a snowstorm. With clouds, over an extended period of time, solar doesn't work. Windmills freeze up. Windmills don't produce all that much energy relation to how much energy they take to build anyway. So there's not that much energy produced off of windmills. So their whole renewable energy standard that they're creating is unreliable, and is actually the reason why Texas utility grid went down, because it was relying on about 25% of Texas electricity is generated from natural gas, or I'm not sorry, natural gas, from windmills and from solar. And when it got really cold, the windmills froze, the solar didn't work, there's snow on it. And guess what? Texas utility grid almost crashed, and disastrously so. So if anything, Texas needs to be less reliant on renewables, more reliant on natural gas, which they have in abundance. Having said that, this is an attack on your capacity to have a vehicle, your capacity to have freedom to move around. They're attacking a technology that, if it was a marketplace decision to buy an EV, I'm all for it. But instead, they're incentivizing EVs, they're forcing manufacturers to make EVs, whether there's a market for it or not. They're subsidizing the purchase of EVs and effectively trying to drive the internal combustion engine off the planet. That is a massive public policy mistake, but most importantly, it's a disaster for our country and for your freedom to have a choice of what vehicle you want to drive and the needs you have to get around town. So folks, when the Biden administration wants to look you in the eye and talk about Bidenomics and how neat everything is, and we can just all sing kumbaya, understand, by 2032, they don't want you to have the choice of whether to buy a internal combustion engine versus a gas powered engine. They prefer to force you into a choice which you may not be able to afford, A, and B, may not be appropriate for your circumstances. Lots of other things going on here. The last and least is China controls battery technology and the manufacture of batteries. We have some batteries being manufactured in the United States. By and large, China controls it. China controls the production for windmills and the like because they produce the materials on windmills and the like. China controls the production of solar power, solar panels, because because they've invested a ton of money into solar panels, and we are customers. We are not producers. Hence, the entire electric scheme is a play to make us completely and utterly energy dependent upon China. If that doesn't scare the hell out of you, I don't know what will. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government, signing off.